The Nikon D7100 has for an age now been the top-end camera the Nikon offers for photography enthusiasts. A decent upgrade from the Nikon D7000, it's been a definite favorite here at Expert Reviews ever since they launched way back in 2010. It's also currently the best specified of Nikon's cameras based around the APS-C size sensor, and is only around £500 at the moment. The thing is, full-frame cameras, such as the Nikon D610, have dropped in price considerably recently, but it's also worth pointing out that the successor to the Nikon D7100 has now been released in the form of, as you could probably guess, the D7200. What this means is that the D7100 body-only price has dropped to just £500 if you shop around. While the D7200 certainly improved on an already winning formula, it's debatable whether or not the improved autofocus and continuous shooting are enough to justify the high price. Sharing plenty of similarities with the older D7000, the D7100's main success has certainly stemmed from its updated controls and ergonomics, and it's good to see that not all that much has changed. The nicely sized optical viewfinder, the generous 950-shot battery life, passive LCD screen for displaying settings, and the dual command dials set it apart from much cheaper DSLRs, such as the Nikon D5000. Likewise, the twin SDXC card slots and robust weather-sealed magnesium alloy body are rarity to find, given the price. We really like the control system here, with plenty of dedicated buttons for a wide range of functions such as ISO speed, white balance, metering, autofocus mode, and bracketing too, simply adjusted by holding down the button and turning the command dials. The dual dials are used quite effectively, including adjusting the ISO speed with the rear dial and toggling the auto ISO with the front dial. It's worth pointing out that many of these buttons are accessed with the left hand, leaving the right hand in charge of the dials. It's definitely this two-handed operation that we find to be incredibly fast and all-around intuitive. While the main menu isn't exactly the quickest to move around in, but with so many physical controls, there's very surprisingly very little need to visit it. The exposure mode and drive mode have dedicated dials too, both of which have locks to avoid accidentally hitting them. At first glance, any external changes compared to the D7000 are tricky to spot, but there are some welcome additions here and there. The generous 3.2-inch screen is a smidge bigger and its resolution has increased to a respectable 1.2 million dots, with white pixels joining the usual RGB for increased brightness. There's also a new button marked I here, which gives you quick access to an extra 10 functions via the screen, such as HDR shooting, color presets, strength of noise reduction, and the option to customize the two buttons on the front of the camera. The live view, video record, and autofocus point lock buttons have been rearranged to a bit more of a logical layout, and there's also lever to toggle the live view mode between photo and video duties too. Setting the aspect ratio to 3:2 or 16:9, for photos and videos respectively. This also makes it clear that videos can't actually use shutter speeds slower than the selected frame rate too, and that the aperture can't be adjusted while recording either. These restrictions, although available, weren't all that obvious on the previous D7000. Sadly, there doesn't seem to be all that much improvement to the live view mode, though. Autofocus becomes frustratingly sluggish in this mode, with shot-to-shot times plummeting from 0.45 to a somewhat unacceptable 4.8 seconds in our tests. Live view is obviously still useful for fine-tuning manual focus, and it's worth pointing out that the D7100 reveals significantly sharper detail than the D5200 when magnifying the live view image. Focus speed. The main list of changes compared to the D7000 can be found inside the camera itself. Thankfully, the sensor's resolution has gone up from 16 to 24 megapixels, while dispensing with an optical low-pass filter in order to maximize detail levels, something I'll get onto later. The autofocus sensor also now has 51 points, including 15 cross-type points for increased sensitivity. The D7000 definitely already lead the way at this price with its 39 points, but we are more than happy to have even more, further cementing Nikon as leading the charge. The dense cluster of points covers most of the frame, and makes it easy to focus precisely on the subject rather than have to line the subject up with an autofocus point. More points should typically improve the accuracy of the 3D tracking focus mode. While didn't have the D7000 on hand to compare it with, the D7000 did a fine job of tracking subjects as they move nearer, further, and around the frame, with more than half the shots in sharp focus. Shooting speed. Continuous shooting performance is quoted as 6 FPS, which is a figure exactly the same as the previous D7000. The higher resolution has actually taken its toll on the camera's endurance, however. With a fast SDHC card, the D7000 kept going at 6 FPS for 100 shots, while the D7100 only managed 18 frames at 5.9 FPS before it slowed to 3.4 FPS. Of course, this isn't exactly a terrible result, though, and should be perfectly capable in most situations. There's also a 1.3x crop mode on offer, which uses a significantly smaller central area of the frame to offer 15.3 megapixel photos at 7 fps, which was around 6.8 fps in our tests, which lasted for 24 frames before slowing to around 4.2 fps.